Good evening, everyone. We are back in the book of Amos, and we are now in chapter 8. As a background, entering into chapter 8, do remember that we are coming to a point of a conclusion of the book. And the background that we should be carrying into this chapter would be the fact that God will definitely judge the northern kingdom. And in not so many words, chapter 8 itself is going to describe how God will be looking at them moving on down the road. And as we begin in chapter 8, again, it says, the Lord God showed me. And the word show here, as we have seen in yesterday, in chapter 7, it's to cause me to see. And so this is another of those visions that God is going to show to Amos, at least for the first 3 verses here this evening. And so when we look at this vision, he says, behold, a basket of summer fruit. Well, a basket is, I suppose, a woven container. I think a basket, a wick made of wick, right? A rattan to our description would be a good idea. And so it is in a basket, and there is this summer fruit, and that was something which I personally had struggled with trying to figure this out. You may not know, some people think that these are figs, or what we call late figs. What are late figs? Well, figs are spring fruits. And as spring carries on into summer, this will be the tail end of the figs. I suppose an equivalent to our time would be when the durian season is at the tail end. Fruits are rare, not as big, may not be as good, but it's still fruits. And so that would be the idea, equivalent to our thinking, the summer fruit. And so God asked Amos, what do you see? And so Amos replied, a basket of summer fruit. And then the Lord said to me, and there must be a meaning to the summer fruit, because God is trying to show a vision to Amos. Now, one of the things that I think now you would have picked up is that the lessons are very visual, right? We are always given visual lessons, as if we are the Sunday school class and God is teaching us Sunday school, right? They are visual lessons. They are all very imagery driven. And so in the image that Amos is seeing right now, he's looking at a basket of summer fruit or late figs. And so God says, the end has come upon my people, Israel. And he says, I will not pass by them anymore. That is the meaning of the summer fruit. Now, how does summer fruit comes to bear with the lesson that is learned, right? This is a lesson. A and B is saying the same thing twice. And so now we talk about late figs. Summer fruit is the tail end, right? The tail end. And what do you know about the tail end of, say, a durian season? We know that very soon there will be no more durians. Well, the summer fruit gives that impression where the time will come where there'll be no more figs. right? The last of the figs will have been born, and that would be idea. And so God says the end has come upon my people. So God is still talking about his people. Israel, the northern kingdom, is still considered his people. And here God is passing a remark. The end means the time will come to an end. One of the imagery of the word end would be when you take a piece of string and you cut it, and well, the end of the string has come to an end. So let me just give you this picture. The string, and then you cut it, and the string comes to an end. And so this would be the end of the string. And that would be end. That's the imagery of end that we can see right here. And so God says, the end has come upon my people, Israel. And so the vision of the basket of summer fruit is to show Amos that the summer fruit represents the end, the tail end of the season. There will be no more fruits after this. And God says, I will not pass by them anymore. Now, the idea of pass by, given the context at least, comes from the word avar. It's like Hebrew, right? Hebrew is avar, that you crossed over from, say, Haran into the land of Canaan, across the Euphrates River. And in Genesis chapter 12, Abraham crossed through the land of Canaan and arrived in Shechem, and then he crossed through that whole place, and then he arrives in Hebron. And so this is the word to pass by, to pass through. And it gives an idea that, no, God is visiting you, and it's a good thing. But God is saying, I am not coming by anymore. So his time of visiting the northern kingdom is coming to an end. That's why we're saying that this is an A and B. It's saying the same thing twice. Now we come to verse 3. And the songs of the temple. Now, I don't think the word here is the temple. One of the things that you find is that this would be, I think another word here would be sanctuary. And this would be the pagan, I wouldn't say pagan, the idol sanctuary. Because there is no temple of God in the northern kingdom. But there are sanctuaries of the golden calves in Bethel, and there will be in Dan. And so God is saying, all these songs that you sing in your sanctuary, it will become wailing in that day. And we need to break this up. Why do you call it wailing? What about wailing? I think this word would be howling. I think howling is a good word. Howling. Why do you howl? In this case, the howling is very much because of mourning. When you lose someone that you love, you cry to the point of howling, right? And in that day, will refer to the day of judgment, the day of judgment. Now, we're not talking about the end times here. We're talking about the day of judgment that will come upon the northern kingdom, says the Lord God. And anytime you read these words, says the Lord God, we should pay attention. Why are they howling? And God is saying, many dead bodies everywhere. Now, these bodies are corpses. They shall be thrown out in silence. And God is saying that all these will be thrown out, and everyone will be hushed. well, silence, right? That nobody is going to say anything. They're holding their tongue. That's what it means in silence. And the intent to show this imagery is there will be massive deaths. Okay. And so in that day that we're talking about, that all these things, 1 and 2, will come to a point where nobody has any words to say. And that will be the first 3 verses. And the first 3 verses speaks about the vision that God is showing to Amos. And God, in short, in a nutshell, is saying that the end will be coming very, very soon. We are now looking at the basket of summer fruits. And before you know it, it's game over for Israel. Now, moving forward is this. In verse 4, this begins an exhortation to the northern kingdom. Hear this. Hear would be our regular word, Shema, right? To hear the voice, hear the words, and understand the meaning. Okay, and then hopefully you do something about it. But this is what God is saying. Hear this. But these are all words of rebuke. You who swallow up the needy and make the poor of the land fail. We need to break this up a little bit, because there seems to be a bit of challenge in the translation. The idea of swallow up is the picture of gasping for air. And the needy would be people who are in want, right? People who are in want, who have need. So needy. And these people are now being caused to gasp for air. I don't think swallow up would be a good way to translate it. It will be you who are causing the needy to gasp for air. I think that would be a good way of presenting it. To pant, to try to breathe. So gasping would be hard to breathe. And this is the accusation and the rebuke that's given to the northern kingdom. You are making the poor of the land fail. The idea of poor here would be the humble, the one who is afflicted. And basically, these would be the same words. The poor of the land and the needy is speaking about the same. Fail means to cease. This is to cause them to be at an end. Fail means to cease, be at the end. And so the idea here is it's a rebuke towards these people of the northern kingdom who is trying to squeeze the air out of those who have need. They are the ones who is trying to make an end to those who are afflicted. And so I guess you could also say that this is an A and B as well. It is these people who are working so hard to cause all the poor and needy people to die. Basically, to lose their themselves. Now, I had repeated myself a number of times that there are 2 major accusations and judgments against the northern kingdom. One would be in the area of idolatry, right? They worship and serve other gods, particularly the golden calves. The second one would be injustice, Hamas, the violence, the treatment of unrighteousness against the poor and the needy. And God is big on this. And so now we are seeing that God is telling them, you are saying this when the new month comes, right? The new month have passed. This is moon would be the new month. Now, if you're not aware, they don't have a PDA, they don't have an iPad. The only way for them to know that the month is starting is when they spot the new moon. And so the moon itself tells them that a month is starting. When the moon is gone, that would be the end of the month. When the new month has come to pass, then that will be the new month. And so they says that we may sell grain. It's like starting the month already for business. And they buy grain, and I think this would be grain, possibly corn, right? Possibly corn. And then he says, and the Shabbat that we may trade wheat. The idea of trading wheat would be to open the grain, right? To open the grain. And these two are talking about the business that they are doing. And what kind of business are they doing? They are making the ephah. The ephah is a weighing mechanism, a weighing measure for dried stuff, right? You're making the ephah small and the shekel large. Now, understand this. The shekel is also a weight. But the ephah is about the grain and the shekel is about the silver, the money. And what they are trying to say is the price has gone up, but the weight of the grain has gone down. Now, in our modern day economic terms, we call this inflation. Okay. But what did they do is they are forcing the price to change, to go up, and they are falsifying the scales by deceit. Now, let me give you a couple of words here. The word falsify means to make crooked. Make crooked. Fixing the scales, actually. And you know, scales may look like this. And they would have a measurement weight on one side and whatever you want to weigh on the other. And it's like a balance. And God is saying that they are doing it in a way where it is by deceit. Now, the word deceit is treachery. And this word is a very peculiar word. And you would see this word a lot more in the book of Jeremiah, where Judah is deceitful, is treacherous. The understanding of treacherous comes this way. It's a picture of pretending everything is okay, but under the covers, you're doing something else. And so falsifying the scales by deceit essentially is pretending that the scales is fine, but actually they are not. Now, can you imagine that this is what they are doing? They are already increasing the price and lowering the weight, and they are now making life even more miserable for the poor. And the description in verse 6 is important. That these people think that they can buy the poor for silver, that they are now cheap, that life is cheap. And by poor, I think we can see this. By poor, we are talking about the dal. Okay, talking about the dal. These are people who are weak, who are lowly, right? Who are lowly. Then we have this another word, needy, for a pair of sandals. The needy actually means people in need, right? People in want, also the poor. And so these two are also another A and B. And literally, they can buy lives. The poor can be bought by silver, and the even poorer, just a pair of sandals. And they even sell bad wheat. Now, this is something which we need to figure out. It's not that the wheat is bad. One of the things that is given in the law in Leviticus is that whenever the rich harvest, they are supposed to leave the grains and the harvest that falls off the basket. There is a tail end that's at the corner of the field, so that there is an idea of gleaning, that the poor may also find food for themselves. And this whole idea of gleaning is about self-respect. If you have a chance to study the book of Ruth, you would come to the idea of gleaning, and Ruth gleaned in the field of Boaz. But the idea here of selling bad wheat is when all this wheat falls on the ground, they sweep it up and they sell it to the poor. And that in itself is adding problems over problems upon the poor and the needy. And in this case, you can see that this is an accusation of injustice. And God takes note of this, and God takes serious concern with injustice. And that in itself is enough for you to actually understand that this is crucial. God is serious, and God is mighty angry with this. So let's continue here. In verse 7, the Lord has sworn by the pride of Jacob, surely I will never forget any of their works. Again, yesterday I had mentioned, whenever God says he swears, he means that he is in very serious note, right? It's a very serious note. He's saying, I swear by the pride of Jacob that I, God, will never forget any of their works, any of the deeds, any of the things they have done. So I put here, things they have done. What things have they done? By mistreating the poor and needy, by persecuting them, by making their life miserable, by practicing injustice and persecution. That is what God is arguing against them. Shall the land not tremble? Tremble means to shake, either in fear or excitement. Okay. I don't think this is a positive excitement. This is the negative idea that the land is already trembling in anger for all these things that they have done. All these. The injustice. Let me just put this word down again. The injustice. And God is now saying, everyone who mourn dwells in it. Because they will be the one mourning. Because people will die when the Assyrians come. Now, all of this land, all of it will refer to the land, right? All of it. They will swell like the river, and this river would be the Nile. They would heave and subside like the river of Egypt. Now, one of the interesting things about the river of Egypt that I was told was that every 40 years, the Nile will swell and flood the banks. Will flood the banks, and basically, what is going to happen is that the swelling literally means the water will ascend, will go up. So swell is a good word. But it swells to the point that it overflows. If you have not seen the Nile River before, it is a huge river. It's nothing like the Klang River and Gombak River. It's a huge river, and the moment it swells up, it will cause devastation on the banks. Right? It will cause devastation on the banks. And so the word heave in this case is to cause things to be driven out of the river. What is driven out of the river would be mud. And to subside here is to sink or collapse. And so the picture would be when the Nile River rises up, it will bring the mud with it. And when the water clears, the mud will sink down on the ground. And it would be, I guess this would be a picture of devastation. And so that would be how it is seen. All right. And so God says, in that day, it shall come to pass in that day. In that day, again, is the day of judgment. And that would be the day when the Assyrians come. And when the day comes to pass, I will make the sun go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in broad daylight. Now, the idea of broad daylight would be in the day, right? In the daytime, where it's supposed to be bright, it will be dark. And the sun will go down at noon. So now we have another A and B. It's talking about an imagery of darkness. And so this would be the time when the Syrians come into the land of Israel, that it is surely a day that is not pleasant. That would be what verse 9 is talking about. It's an imagery of darkness. And an imagery of darkness, I guess, is globally understood, even in the Hebrew times. When it's dark, it's not pleasant. And God says, this is a dark day. Now, in verse 10, God is describing why is this a dark day. Verse 10 is crucial for us to understand God will turn. The idea of turn is to turn over. I guess in our modern day, it's the word transform, right? Not the transformer, but transform. Transform feasts. Feasts when people come together to celebrate. Now we have the word feast when we are talking about the feast of Israel, right? And God has put in for us the feasts of Israel. Now the feasts of Israel are the days where they would come together and they would gather and basically to, how should I say, to celebrate, right? To celebrate because it's a command of God. And so this would be a time of celebration. And so God says, I will turn your celebrations when you come out to celebrate, I am going to turn it into mourning. Now, verse 10, when it says mourning, it will be mourning rites, mourning for the dead. For the dead. And all your songs into lamentation. Lamentation would be, how should we call it? Lamentation, I guess we could call it, let's see, the beating of the breasts. Also a form of mourning. So this would be A and B again. two lines that gives the same picture, that all your celebration is going to be mourning, and all your songs of celebration will be a lament, will be a song where you are mourning, right? It's a mourning song. And then I will bring sackcloth on every waist, baldness on every head. Again, this would be another A and B. This is a custom. Sackcloth is mourning, right? It's also used for repentance, but it is also mourning. Baldness is another symbol for mourning as well. That you shave your head in utter despair. Okay. Now you find sackcloth when people are angry, in despair, disappointment. Same with baldness, shaving of the head. And so these would be in despair. Another A and B. And then God says, I will make it like mourning for an only son. Its end like a bitter day. What is a bitter day? A bitter day is a day of discontentment. Mourning for an only son is an extreme disappointment. Now, why would that be the case? Remember, the Hebrew people are similar to the Orientals. When an Oriental family loses the only son, I guess the Chinese have a saying, 冇仔送終, that you don't have a son to actually take care of your funeral. And so this would be that kind of sheer sadness and sheer disappointment. So again, you would have the situation of an A and B. So we have three pairs. And that would be how we would read these verses. Okay. Now, let us go on to verse 11 and 12. Now, 11 and 12 is quite interesting. In 11 and 12, God is saying, behold, the days are coming. And again, we're talking within context. It would be the day of judgment, right? The day of judgment. What judgment? The Assyrians. Now, we are studying this book of Amos from hindsight. So I will just tell you up front that we're talking about the Assyrians for the northern kingdom. That I will send a famine on the land. Now, the word famine is a very interesting word because the word famine is not an English word. If you remember, every time we deal with Hebrew words, they are very imagery driven, right? They are very action oriented to describe anything because we are listening to what is said, and so it needs to drive and conjure a vision and I guess a video that's playing in your mind. And so God says, I am going to send a famine into the land, and literally the word famine means hunger. That God is going to send hunger into the land. And by hunger, of course, it would be a desire to eat. Okay, and hence it is more of a verb than a noun. That God is going to create a time when everybody will be hungry. And then God says, it is not hungry for bread, nor thirsty for water. Now, typically, famine would be a lack of food or water. And that would be what typical famine is. But remember, I said that the word famine literally means hunger or to be hungry. And so God says it's nothing to do with bread and water, but it has to do with this other thing here. It is about hearing the words of the Lord. Now, this would come as a matter of a surprise, that the time will come when God will cause them to want to hear the words of God. And remember, to hear the words of God is to understand God's word. Now, there are two aspects here that we are talking about. One is literally to hear, to understand, to do something about it. And that's the typical idea of hearing. The other one would be related to verse 12, that they're trying to hear answers, right? And let's park that, because when we get to verse 12, we will see that. And in verse 12, it says, they shall wander from sea to sea. The idea of wandering is actually to quiver, to stagger. I think stagger would be a good idea, good word. To stagger means there is no specific direction. It is to go here and go there. That would be the picture of wander. And he would go from one sea to another sea. Now, are there so many seas? The seas that we can see in the land of Israel would be the Mediterranean Sea, called the Great Sea. We would also be able to understand that there was another sea that is surrounding them. That would be the Red Sea. So we would have the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Okay. And then it says, from the north to the east, they shall run to and fro. And the idea here, north would be the direction of north, and north will be a time of darkness. Okay, north portrays darkness, so you just take my word for it. East is the sunrise. So it's a contrast of from the dark side to the bright side, right? They shall run to and fro. And the idea of to and fro is to go here and go there. That would be the idea. To run to and fro is actually one word. To go here and go there. And all of these, 1, 2, and 3, are actually talking about the same thing. A, B, and C. They are trying desperately to seek the word of the Lord. And understand this, I'm saying that the hearing the words of the Lord and seeking the words of the Lord are the same things. Okay? And the understanding of seeking is to seek to find answers, basically. To look for answers. To look for something, right? To search out. And in this case, it will be answers, and they will not find it. Now, this is a very interesting picture that God is putting, because he's saying that when the time comes, when the Assyrians come, they will try to figure out what's happening, and they want to hear from God. Now God is talking to them through Amos, and they are not listening. Remember yesterday, Amaziah tells Amos, go back home to Judah. You're from Tekoa, just get lost. Don't prophesy in this land of Israel. So God is now concluding, the days will come when you want to look for an answer from my words, but you will not find it. That would be a disastrous day. You will not find it. In verse 13 and 14 will be our last two verses. In that day, The day of judgment again. Fair virgins and strong young men. Now, these are two of the same time of the young people of the day. These are people who haven't been married yet. They are young ones, and they are the pride of the land, right? And it says they shall faint from thirst. And I need to break this out. They shall faint from thirst. And the word faint from thirst is actually one word, right? The idea here would be he would cover. So let me just break this down. He will cover the fair maidens, virgins. And then the last one here would be about thirst. And the idea of thirst would be to tie around the mouth, cover the mouth of young men. Again, this is A and B. Unfortunately, the translation is a bit off here. But basically, what God is trying to say is, in that day, the fair maidens will be covered. And covered, I think, would be as a picture of being taken into captivity. Right? It's a picture of captivity. To cover the mouth of the young men and cover, and in this case, I suppose, to cover up. That would be the meaning of this word. To wrap up. Okay, to wrap up. To wrap up the fair maidens and to cover the mouth of the young men, both gives a picture of captivity. That they will be captured, they will be tied up, they will be swept away by the Assyrians. And so I think you may have to relook at verse 13 again. And so verse 13 really gives us a slightly different translation in the Hebrew. Very much because of this particular line here, shall faint from thirst. It literally means to cover up or wrap up the fair virgins and to cover the mouths of young men. Now, to cover the mouth literally means to thirst, right? You can't drink, right? This idea of cover, of faint here, is literally to wrap up the fair virgins. Now, let us come to the last line. The last line would be those who swear, who makes an oath, right? Makes an oath by the sin of Samaria. And the word sin here would be another word. This is not your regular word for sin. This really means wrongdoing. Wrongdoing. The word here is ashma, right? Ashma. And it's not khatat, right? It's ashma. This would be a guilt, a presentation of a sin offering. It's the wrongdoing of Samaria. If you are swearing, you're making an oath by all the wrong things that Samaria is doing. Now, what is Samaria doing that is wrong? Now, let me repeat myself again. 1, idolatry. 2, injustice. These are two huge ticket items that God will hold them to account. And you say, as your God lives, O Dan, as the way of Bathsheba lives, they shall fall and never rise again. And we need to break this up. First of all, if we talk about a small letter, now, small and big letter is just a translation issue here. And here it is Eloheka, and it comes from the word Elohim. As your gods lives, O Dan. And Dan would be the northernmost point. The way of Beersheba would be the southernmost point. Now, one of the things you find when you read the Old Testament is the expression from Dan to Beersheba, from Dan to Beersheba, from the northernmost to the southernmost. And you say that your God lives and the way of Beersheba lives. Well, God is saying this. They would be those who swear, and these would be the northern kingdom, who feels that they have done no wrong, but by God they have done everything wrong. They shall fall. And the word fall here literally means be cast down. And to fail, and never to arise. And arise here to stand up. And so now we have a contrast of two actions. Samaria, or the northern kingdom, will be cast down and never rise again. And these are serious words by God. And I think in verse 14, as we conclude, it would do us well to remember that God is saying that Israel will not, how should we say, will not be revived. There'll be no more kings after this conquest. And of course, from hindsight again, we see that after the king of Hosea, the Assyrians came, and we know for a fact that the northern kingdom never re-established itself ever again. Now, with the southern kingdom, it was different, right? They were taken away into captivity to Babylon. After 70 years, they came back, but they never had a king still, right? But the intent is to tell us this, that the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, because Beersheba is in the south, both are going to be a time where there'll be no more kings. When all these things are going to happen, both northern and southern, and primarily we're talking about the northern here, that they will not be re-established. And that would be the most serious punishment, I would say, that they will be carried away forcibly away from their own land. And we have seen some of that yesterday in chapter 7. And with this, we end chapter 8.